A primary school in Adelaide is encouraging a biological boy to use the girls' bathrooms and to compete against the girls in sport. And here's the kicker, guys. This is at a Catholic school. Now, when parents raise their very legitimate concerns with the school's response, it's gaslighting at its finest. And I've actually got a response from Catholic Education, which you are going to be totally shocked by. To top it all off, the media has now got involved. And on the weekend, we saw this headline from the Advertiser, "Trans Girl Race Joy." Gosh, what's really going on? Well, we're going to expose that today on the Dr. Joe Show. Before we get into the show today, and it is a bit of a different topic, guys, but I felt that this was really important to blow the lid on. I've got my hands on documents and information that hasn't been reported in the mainstream media, so you're going to find out what's really going on. But I would ask that if you're new here, or if you're a returning viewer, because so many of our returning viewers are actually not subscribed to the channel, can you please make sure that you do press that subscribe button and make sure that you're a subscriber? So this all started when Senator Leah Blythe spoke up on behalf of these parents and contacted Channel 9 News. Let's watch.
Zoe Jones is a mother of two young girls who are now using the same school bathrooms as a biological boy.
Our children feel unsafe. They don't feel comfortable in going to the girls' toilets. So other parents have rang the school. They have, the school has spoken to them, and they've advised that if our girls don't want to use the girls' toilets with a biological male, they need to use a disabled toilet.
So this is Zoe. Her daughters go to a Catholic primary school in Adelaide, and she's incredibly brave to have actually come forward and broken this issue out, like brought it into the light, because we do know that the way the other side really succeeds is they intimidate and bully all of us into silence. And for too long, people have just agreed to be silent under the name of like, that's respectful, that's kind, that's inclusive, that's tolerant. And then we see where this ends. It ends with her daughter being told to use the disabled bathroom, despite the fact she's not disabled, and the boy, the biological boy who's now identifying as a girl, is using the girls' bathroom, and parents are contacting the school saying their girls are upset, and, you know, actually nothing has changed. I'm going to share with you the school's response in a minute, but I wanted to share with you the letter that Zoe wrote on August 13th to the school, and she'll mention her daughter. I'm not going to use her name. We'll call her Lucy for the purposes of this. So I'm writing as a concerned parent regarding a matter that has come to my attention about bathroom access within the school. It is my understanding that a transgender student who is biologically male is currently using the girls' toilets. While I recognise that this student is going through a significant personal transition and should be treated with dignity and kindness, my daughter Lucy has been directly impacted by this situation in a way that cannot be ignored. Lucy is a survivor of significant trauma, and she goes into a little bit of the details, but to protect Lucy, I'm not going to go through that now. And because of that history, Lucy has heightened feelings of vulnerability and fear around males in spaces where she expects privacy and safety. She has expressed that she feels unsafe, unseen, unheard, and not valued as a female student in a Catholic school. I need to make it very clear. When I send my children to school, I expect that they would be safe and feel safe. This is a Catholic school where I believe female students would have the right to private facilities separate from the opposite sex. I request, 1, a formal written response from both the school and Catholic Education essay explaining the reasoning and policy behind this decision. 2, an explanation of why parents were not informed or consulted prior to changes that could impact student wellbeing. 3, immediate consideration for an alternative arrangement that ensures the privacy and dignity of all students, including providing single-use bathrooms if needed. So this is a very reasonable response. And what I know from speaking with Zoe, that when her daughter was in grade 4, at the end of that year, the students in that classroom were told this particular boy is now a girl, and we're going to use this name and these pronouns to refer to this person, and that's what everybody must do. There was no notification to the parents that something as serious as that was happening and that they were going to be using a new name and pronouns and that this kid had transitioned. There was no notification of something of that magnitude happening in this Catholic school. The kids were just told, and no doubt the kids were really confused, but it feels almost Orwellian, doesn't it, that the kids were sitting there in class, these little like 10-year-olds, and the teacher and the principal comes in and says, this boy is now a girl, this is his name, which is a girl's name, and we now must refer to this person as a her and a she. And, you know, if you're a 10-year-old child, like that would just be like mind-boggling to you, because it defies kind of like biology and common sense and everything you've known about the world. And yet these people who are in the position of responsibility and authority are telling you must do this. None of the parents were informed, and that happened in year 4. And now what we're seeing is this this kid who's a biological boy identifying as a girl is now using the girls' bathrooms, and the girls are being told to use disabled bathrooms. Now, fundamentally, the problem with this is it's just not true. It's based on a lie. The girls shouldn't be using the disabled bathrooms because they're not disabled, and the boy shouldn't be using the girls' bathrooms because he's not a girl. And, my heart goes out to this kid, and this is not to say anything about him. This is just a child, like a kid that's very, very confused about who they are. And the research shows that, there could be a lot of environmental factors in that child's life that could be leading to this confusion. And instead of actually giving this little boy the care and support that he really needs to find out what's really going on in his life, this Catholic school is moving to just affirm this boy in his delusion and to force everybody else to do that too, even though it is based on a lie. Never mind the fact that this is in direct contravention of the Catholic faith. God made them male and female. I mean, whose religion is this so-called Catholic school observing here? I mean, it's clearly not the Catholic religion, is it? Let's look at their response from the principal of this school to Zoe. I ask that all school-related communications remain confidential and not be published externally, including on social media sites. The Charter for Parents in Catholic Schools, which outlines the principles and expectations for partnership, is attached. I mean, that just sounds like a threat. It's why did you go to the media on this? How dare you? But she went to the media because the school was doing nothing. And then it says, in working with students in our community, we are guided by the principle that each child and young person is welcomed and have inestimable value, and that to be welcomed, each child and young person must have access to places, spaces and approaches to be a thriving person. Decisions are made following consideration of professional medical advice, government policy, legal obligations, and the need to respectfully balance a range of interests, concerns and perspectives. So notice the perspective that is missing here, the Catholic perspective, like God's perspective. They say, we are making decisions based on professional medical advice, government policy, legal obligations, and the need to balance different interests. Well, what about the fact that you are a Catholic school? And it is very clear from Catholic teaching that transgender ideology has no part. This is not to say that the Catholic Church is a place for just everybody who's perfect and nobody's struggling. I mean, Pope Francis made it very clear it's a field hospital for sinners, right? And that's the truth of it. This is not about judgment, but it is about truth. And God's truth, the Catholic Church teaches that, biology is how we identify gender, what could we base gender in other than the fact that someone is biologically male or biologically female. Transgender ideology is totally based on this idea that God made a mistake, that, I was born a boy with boy body parts, but I have a female brain and I feel like I'm a girl. That's essentially saying God made a mistake, and it's just so anti-Catholic. And yet this principle refers to the Charter for Parents, a little bit of a subtle dig there to say, be careful because you're breaking our charter and there's consequences for that. Who knows what they're going to do to this parent. But if you actually look at the Charter for schools, for parents in SA Catholic schools, it says that it's a partnership between the schools and the parents. And it says, number one, the partnership recognises the primary role parents play in their child's faith formation, learning and well-being. So that begs the question, why were these kids told to lie to this biological boy and use a female name and pronouns and be told that this is now a girl? Why were they lied to if the parents have a primary role to teach their children about those very, very basic and fundamental things, and why were parents not informed? And then the second point in this charter says that the partnership recognises the contribution that parents make by valuing the Catholic identity and mission of the schools. Well, where is the Catholic identity of this school? I mean, you can't see it. Like you need, it's like one of those Where's Wally pages that my kids look at, where you're like straining your eyes to find Wally. Like you cannot find this school's Catholic identity, because at its very basic level, it's teaching kids that girls can be boys and boys can be girls. It gets worse, guys, because Senator Leah Blythe now writes to Catholic education, and you're just going to be so fired up when you see their response. And that's actually, their response was what made me want to do this episode, because I just thought, I normally talk about abortion, but this is just such a grave injustice to what they're doing to our children. I have to say something, I have to do something. So that's what this video is about. And my heart goes out to Zoe because she's just a mum who's at a school. The school has all of the power. She's up against the entire education department, not just the Catholic education department, but the state education department and the Malinowskis government, which has blocked an inquiry into gender ideology because they just didn't want to look at this issue. They just wanted to sweep it under the rug, never mind the children. Malinowskis plays such a big game about how he's protecting children with their mobiles and on social media. But at a very fundamental level, we have children who are being abused in our state because this transgender ideology is being pushed on them. And we've got little girls being told to use the disabled bathrooms, even though they're survivors of the worst kinds of abuse that you can imagine. And this is deeply traumatic for them. And yet they're being gaslit into being told that the problem is with them. And so my heart goes out to Zoe because it's hard as a mum going up against the machine, and yet she's done that, and I'm really proud of her for doing that. And I think, it's really awesome that Senator Leah Blythe, who's a new senator for the Liberal Party in South Australia, she also is using her authority as a senator to get behind this. And so, Leah Blythe wrote a letter to them. I'm going to read their response first. Because I want to show you what they said. So they said, this is from the Catholic Education Department of South Australia. For leaders of children and young people, and for all those with a vested interest in social equity and cohesion, the public reporting last week of the situation at a Catholic primary school serves as a strong and timely reminder of how we still have so far to travel to create and experience equity and inclusion in communities and societies more broadly. So right off the bat, guys, how is this written from the Catholic Education Department? Like, equity and inclusion are not Catholic principles. Like that equality is, like, that's very clear in the Bible, that in St. Paul's writings around the equal dignity of the human person. But these notions of equity and inclusion are actually very left-wing, ideologically driven agendas that are taking over not just our universities but our schools and our corporates. And yet this is a letter from the Catholic Education Department. And note the gaslighting there, that her, bringing this out into the light, actually telling the truth about what the school has done, that serves as a strong and timely reminder of how far we still have to travel to create and experience equity and inclusion. We don't want equity. Equity is what we saw in Soviet Russia or Mao's China, where you've got millions of innocent people being killed and trampled on by this notion of equity. This is a Marxist ideology. It's not a Catholic principle at all. The letter goes on. It says every school community in South Australia is committed to inclusion. Legislation and recommendations from various royal commissions make clear that schools and schooling are for every student regardless of background or factors. Catholic schools, like all schools, must fully embrace these new legislative requirements, and rightly so, because they are designed to protect the rights of children and young people. So first of all, I'm not quite sure what legislation they're even referring to that requires schools to ensure that girls are using disabled bathrooms and boys are using girls' bathrooms. I haven't seen that law passed anywhere. But what's even worse is they're coming right behind this. Instead of actually saying the state is making us do this and we have a problem with it, but we have to, which I would have an issue with, because if you're a Catholic institution, you should be exercising your conscience and exercising institutional conscientious objection to run that school the way you see fit according to Catholic principles. Otherwise, you should not have the name Catholic in the title. But that's not even what they're saying here. They're saying we actually love this, approach to regulating the education system. And we think it's the right thing to do. They said rightly so. We think girls should be forced to use disabled bathrooms and have boys compete in their sports. Perhaps even more powerfully, Catholic schools and the 10,000 staff who work and minister in our schools, offices and centres are called to create spaces of encounter where children, families and staff are invited into a relationship with a loving God. Our schools embrace the mission of the Catholic Church, and our staff work every day and with the very best intentions to be welcoming and inclusive, to find a place for everyone, especially those who might be considered on the margins, to honour and protect the dignity of each child, to be true witnesses to Jesus and the Gospels. You know what I think Jesus would do if he walked into the Catholic Education Office in Adelaide? He would start making a whip and hitting people with it. He would start overturning tables. He would be so furious that these little children, he says in the Bible, it is better to have a millstone around your neck and be buried into the ocean than to damage my little ones, right? And think about what the Catholic Education Office is doing here to these children, through this policy, through this gender affirmation approach, which is forcing little kids to lie to each other and be part of this big transgender plot, to take over our society, to take over our culture. Just think about how angry he would be at this. And yet this is the response from Catholic education. And here's the thing, guys, and this bit's pretty important, so listen up. Jesus was never about inclusion. I think we've got this like modern idea that's obviously permeated the Catholic Education Office, that, Jesus was like some kind of hippie that would just walk around being nice to people. No, the thing that Jesus, that was so characteristic of him, perhaps his most defining quality, is that he was about truth. The truth, not his truth or your truth or my truth, the truth, the objective truth that, God created a male and female, which is why a boy's biology is different to a girl's biology, which is how we know what gender we are. And the Catholic Education Office, what is so harmful here in affirming this child's delusion is that this could have lifelong consequences for him. Like this approach could mean he never has children. This approach could permanently scar and maim his body. There are so many detransitioners coming out now speaking about this horror. The Cass Review in the UK has clearly identified the problems with the Tavistock Clinic's gender affirmation response. We are clearly, even the Olympic Committee is coming on board around, the sport has to be for biological males and biological females in separate divisions. This is really now moving, like the zeitgeist is shifting, and yet the Catholic Education Office seems to have the wokest of the woke response to this. That's circa 2020, not 2025, when we now know the horror of what we've inflicted on children over the past 5 to 6 years with this transgender ideology being, permeating everything. We're now seeing the error of our ways, and yet here in Australia and in the Catholic Education Office, it seems to be still the guiding principle. And so the letter goes on. It says, of course, in every school and every community, this is a work in progress. There's always more to do. Children and young people who feel like they don't belong or are searching for more. Now, notice this emphasis on inclusion. Who does it exclude? It excludes the girls, doesn't it? It excludes these little girls who don't want to be in a bathroom with boys. Like, these girls are at an age where they will be getting their periods, where they're starting to hit puberty and their bodies are starting to develop. They don't want to be in a space with boys. And so when the Catholic Education Office says, we need to do more, there's always more to do for children and young people who feel like they don't belong or are searching for more. The truth is, when they go to all the lengths in the world to include this little boy who's identifying as a girl, they are excluding all of the little girls like Lucy and her friends who just feel like they cannot even go to the bathroom. Like, girls are apparently holding in their pee. They're not drinking water throughout the day because they don't want to have to go to the same bathroom as a boy. And instead of understanding where the girls are coming from and actually speaking up for them and protecting them, they're actually marking these girls and their parents as transphobes who need to be punished. And the letter then goes on to say, yet our schools and staff remain steadfast in their commitment to be welcoming of all, and especially those on the margins, however that might be understood or described in Australia at this time. So plain as night follows day, that sentence indicates what is their guiding principle. It's just the social mores of the time. It's whatever we happen to be into at the time. You get the impression that if these guys were living in Nazi Germany and gassing Jews was the norm, they would be okay with that because they are guided by that, not by some kind of objective, actual truth. And they say, unfortunately, the recent media and related coverage of a current situation at a Catholic primary school has added to pain, hurt and trauma for young people and families. What about the girls? Like, where are the girls in this letter? Such events highlight the challenges of being one in community. See, being one in community doesn't mean that we just affirm everybody's delusion. The whole point of the Catholic Church as a community, as a church, is there's a unity in that theology, the orthodoxy that people are subscribing to because they believe in it as the one true faith. It goes on, of course, truly being in communion. In this instance, we're being asked to see difference, not as something to fear and push away, but as something to understand and appreciate. We are being asked to build bridges and not create division, to be loving and merciful, not judgmental and hurtful. So that's the response they gave, and it honestly makes you want to puke, because here is Senator Leah Blythe asking some very specific questions, bathroom access policy. What was the policy basis and reasoning underpinning the decision to alter bathrooms access arrangements? 2, mental health considerations. What measures were taken to assess the potential mental health impacts of these arrangements on students other than the boy who self-identifies as a girl, particularly those with a history of trauma before implementation? 3, how does the school reconcile this arrangement with its responsibility as a Catholic institution to prioritise the safety, privacy, dignity and sense of security of all students? So this was a very clear letter with very clear enumerated points, none of which are answered in this gaslighting response from Catholic education, none of which are addressed at all. You know, in all of the responses that have been given by the school, by the principal and by the Catholic Education Office, not once has it been addressed, the singular point, why is a biological boy using the girls' bathrooms and why are the girls being told to use the disabled bathrooms when they're not disabled? That has not been addressed even once. So this letter could have been written by the Greens Party. It could have been written by Dan Andrews. It could have been written by the South Australian Abortion Action Coalition, but it was written by the Catholic Education Office. And by the way, you know, this is just about the trans issue, but imagine these people writing a letter on abortion. Like they're not pro-life. How could they ever be pro-life? They're up to here with a woke religion. Like it's clearly such a part of them that they could write a letter like that to Senator Leah Blythe and for the principal to write that letter to the parents. And anyone who ever raises a concern, a very legitimate concern against this trans cult, they're labelled the bad guy. The Catholic Education Office does it to Zoe and Senator Leah Blythe in this letter. They say you're compounding the suffering of a very marginalised and underprivileged group. You know, for example, after the Australian revealed just a week ago that in not Catholic schools, in state schools in Victoria, there's a respectful relationships program where children as young as 5 and 6 are being taught case studies about what it means to be transgender. And let me read to you one of the case studies now. This is called the Gender Identity Case Study. Stacey is a transgender girl. She dresses like the other girls, plays with them, and everything seems fine. But one day, Lara says Stacey should be in the boys' team at school, not the girls' team. Now, I think Lara's onto something there, but this gaslighting case study tells kids what they actually should believe, what the truth is. It says, ask, is it true that Stacey would not be allowed to be in the girls' team with the other girls? What could Stacey do or say? Some sample responses might include: 1, yes, I can play with the girls' team because I am a girl. 2, go and ask the teacher if you don't believe me. Our teacher says I belong in the girls' team. So this whole thing is based on a lie, and we're teaching kids to lie, and we're telling them to go ask the teacher who will then lie to them. And so when the Australian uncovered this, the response from Jacinta Allen, the Victorian Premier who's replaced Dan Andrews, is pretty much from the same playbook as the Catholic Education Office. Let's watch.
I'll repeat again. Transgender kids are 15 times more likely to kill themselves. So whether it's across our schooling system or across our health system, supporting those kids and supporting those families should be a priority because it's the right thing to do. What's not right is this ongoing campaign to tear down programs that are about strengthening kids' resilience.
The Victorian government's program, Respectful Relationships, is not about teaching kids resilience. It's about brainwashing and indoctrinating the next generation of kids as young as 5 and 6, grooming them into this transgender cult, which tells kids that you're not a boy or a girl based on your biology. It's just based on something entirely nebulous and subjective. And it is so incredibly dangerous. And then we're gaslighting them and saying, you know, if this feels odd to you or you're wondering, like, why is that boy competing against me in sport, and you want to ask a question, we're gaslighting them into telling them that that is based on a lie, and the teacher is going to say, of course Stacey, who's a boy, can be in the girls' team because she's a girl. Now, make no mistake, this is a statement of faith. This is a statement of doctrine. To say to kids that a boy who has a penis is a girl, that is a statement of faith. There is no scientific basis for that at all. So for the Victorian government, which is, you know, lockstep with the woke religion, this trans cult religion, to be singing from the same song sheet as the Catholic Education Office in Adelaide, the Catholic Education Office in Adelaide, that tells you how far this has come, how sinister it now is, and how much we all should be speaking up like Zoe is at this school. We see from the letter from Catholic Education that, Zoe and Leah Blythe are causing additional pain, hurt and trauma. And this is not only the wrong approach, but it's also incredibly dangerous. These people don't care about trans kids if they're pushing suicide as an option into their faces. Like, this is just not ethical from the Premier. It's not ethical from the trans cult to be pushing this, to be saying anyone who criticises us, you're just amplifying our risk of suicide. This was spoken about by Bernard Lane in The Australian, where he said, why amplifying the suicide risk cynically inflames the transgender row. And he says, a study of the UK Tavistock Clinic found 4 patients over 10 years known or suspected to have died by suicide out of a total of 15,000. And that was a clinic that treats people with gender dysphoria. And he writes, if Alan wished to prevent harm, she should stop the suicide scare campaign. Unwilling or unable to discuss social transition, she protested twice that transgender kids are 15 times more likely to kill themselves. Like politicians, journalists are supposed to follow mental health advice, not to harp on the suicide risk of a particular group, not to catastrophize or oversimplify the possible causes of suicide. Social contagion of suicide is a distinct possibility. So this is just so incredibly dangerous. Journalists have a norm, a principle, an ethical principle of not talking about suicide in relation to particular groups because it's likely to create that social contagion. It's going to increase the amount of suicide is going to be in their minds and it's going to cause more of it. And yet here, the trans community and their apologists like Jacinta Allen and the Catholic Education Office, they are amplifying that risk even further, but that's their go-to. You criticise us for allowing a boy to be in girls' sports or to use girls' bathrooms. Well, he's going to commit suicide, and I bet Zoe, and I don't know this for a fact, but I bet Zoe herself has had that thrown in her face. How dare you publicise this, because you're adding to trauma for that family, for that child. He's probably going to kill himself. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. But you cannot manipulate people to be part of this lie on that basis. Researchers from Finland, so Bernard Lane quotes this study and he says, the clearest study so far hails from Finland, where researchers concluded suicide risk was not driven by gender distress, but by the accompanying psychiatric problems. Because this is a mental illness. These kids are struggling mentally and we're not treating the actual problem. And he says, and the risk was not reduced by the hormonal or surgical treatments of gender medicine, which was a finding repeated by England's historic Cass review. And that was the review into the Tavistock Clinic of over 15,000 patients. So, the evidence is actually increasingly clear that the suicide risk is not helped by the gender affirmation model. In fact, it's probably harmed by it because we're not treating the root cause. And as we can see from where the UK is going on this, and partly because of the courageous pioneering work of trailblazers like J.K. Rowling, who's put this front and centre in her advocacy, but we can see that the rest of the world is really moving on from this. Trump's executive order that biology is how we determine male and female, and tying fundings of universities to make sure that universities aren't allowing boys to be playing in girls' sports because of the whole Leah Thomas debacle where, girls were not placing in these competitions because they were being forced to compete against a biological male who was something like the 500th ranked swimmer as a male when he was competing in the male division. But of course he goes in the female division and he's, winning all these races. And so thankfully, in America, that's being rectified. But even in the UK, we've seen that there was fury there a couple of years ago about a secondary school where there were these gender neutral bathrooms that left young girls too scared to use them because they were worried about the boys filming them on their phones. Following that and the outcry that was happening in the UK over this issue, the government actually introduced a new requirement for single-sex bathrooms for separate male and female toilets. Now, at Lucy's school here in Adelaide, she actually organised a petition, God bless her, a petition, and I heard there was at least 40 girls who had signed on to that petition saying, please, can you allow us to have our own space, like our own girls' bathrooms? I mean, this girl is amazing for having the courage to speak up. I can't wait to see what she becomes. But, she gave that to the principal and it was just thrown back at her face for being a transphobe. Like, this is just shocking that the Catholic school is not responding. And to make matters worse, because this gets even worse. This is the same Catholic school that is allowing this biological boy, and this is not his fault. I want to make this very clear. It's not his fault. It's the fault of all of the adults in his life, including his mum, including his dad. I don't know where his dad is. He's not reported in the press at all. But definitely, the teachers, the school system, his parents, this is their fault. It's not this little boy's fault. But this same Catholic school is now allowing him to compete in the girls' sporting divisions against the girls. And so the Advertiser had this headline on the weekend: "Trans girls race joy." Now, this is literally just a primary school cross-country race. I showed it to my kids. They were a little bit bemused. Like, how is this on the front page? Like, is this a state championship, Mum? Like, was this the nationals? I was like, no. It's just a primary school kids race just on the oval at school. Like, this boy's won the girls race. And yet the Advertiser, unironically, has on its front page, "Trans girls race joy." I mean, the headline should have read, "Girls heartbreak, boy wins gold medal in their race." That's what the headline should have been. In fact, one of the little girls who was in that race, who really wanted to get into the state cross-country team and represent her school, she was deprived of being able to do that because she didn't place high enough, because this boy took the gold medal position. The little girl that came silver, she was deprived of getting a gold medal because this little boy beat her. And, this is not just a problem with Catholic Education Office. This is not just a problem with the mum and the school. It goes right to the top. Kate Jenkins, when she was the commissioner, she said that at a community level, boys should be allowed to compete in girls' sport, but as it gets more competitive and it's like club sport and you're training for the Olympics, then we respect biology and we put divisions where boys are over here and girls are over here. Now, that makes no sense. Like, I am a mum whose children are very sporty. I don't know where they got it from. It's clearly not from me. But one of our kids, our eldest daughter, she's in the national squad for climbing because she has a dream of going to the Olympics. But the thing is, as any parent of an elite athlete knows, it doesn't start at that level. Like, how stupid is Kate Jenkins? It starts at the community sport level. Like, you don't suddenly wake up one day and go, "Oh, my kid has a massive talent in running or athletics or climbing. They're going to make the Olympics." You start by just enrolling your kids in things like little athletics, or we took her down to the climbing gym so she could climb with my husband. People started to notice she was pretty good, and then she would just win these competitions. But they were just community-based competitions. But if she'd had a little boy in her division, because, this is 2025 where we're talking about like one boy in a race full of girls. But if we keep going down this road, we will have races where it's predominantly boys, where where there is no such thing as girls' sport. And if my daughter had been in those competitions, she wouldn't even have realised she had a gift at climbing, because there would have been boys and they would have been outstripping her. And to be clear, how does this even make sense? Like, how does Kate Jenkins rationalise this? Because even if you think about it for just 30 seconds, you realise it is just completely hollow. I mean, how does this work? Why is it all of a sudden wrong to have them competing in the same race when it was at the community level, it was totally fine for them to be competing in the same race? How does it become wrong over here just because it's competitive sport and not here because it's a community level? And, as anyone knows, community level sport is competitive. Like, my kids, when they're training for a race at school, they often can't sleep because they're so excited and nervous. My daughter's got a long jump competition coming up, and a different daughter, and, she's been training for weeks for that. These kids take this sport seriously. It is so deeply patronising and gravely wrong for adults to come and gaslight them and tell them, "Oh, no, it's just community sport. It's fine for a little boy to be competing in the girls' races." The mother of this kid says, "I knew that if I didn't allow her to have some authority of how she feels and who she is, then she wouldn't be sitting here today." So there's that, her pulling out the suicide card. And I feel so sorry for this kid. So let's just think about how monstrous this mum is. She's literally making the threat that if you don't allow my boy to be treated as a girl, playing in girls' sports, going to girls' bathrooms, then that my child's going to kill themselves. They wouldn't be here today. This is a one-to-one threat, and it's so emotionally manipulative, and then so incredibly weak of the Catholic Education Office to just say, to roll over, to just say, that's fine, he can compete in cross country. And then think about what this does to the kid, to have his own mum say that, if this doesn't happen, he's going to kill himself. That's just, I really hope that this child doesn't see this or hasn't seen this or hasn't read this article, but I doubt it. I doubt it. This mum seems to be completely unhinged, and her so-called science that, he hasn't been through puberty yet, so therefore it's entirely fine for him to compete in girls' sport. Well, I looked at the state cross-country results for 2024 in South Australia, and for the 10-year-old 11-year-old and 12-year-old divisions where the girls and boys are in separate streams, even the girl that places first in the 10, 11 and 12-year-old divisions, she wouldn't even get the bronze medal in the male race. She's at least 40 to 50 seconds behind, even though she's placed first in the girls' division. And in cross country, and you might be thinking 40 seconds, but in cross country, that's actually a significant amount of time. And even though this mother is right that girls and boys, their differences become way more pronounced after puberty, to the point that the boys are actually running a kilometre more in races for cross country once they hit puberty. That's the ruling. But even so, pre-puberty, boys still have an advantage in physical strength, speed and endurance due to higher muscle mass and size. So all of this to say, we are now at a point where we're facing a crisis. This isn't just happening in state schools. It's happening in Catholic schools. This is the Catholic Education Office that's allowing a boy to use the girls' bathrooms and to compete in girls' sport. And I think we're now at a point where we have to say this isn't a Catholic institution. This isn't a Catholic education office. This is a state-run education office. And the only recourse we have is to actually create such a fury to the Catholic Archdiocese of Adelaide, to actually write to them, to speak to them, to email them, to really get the word out that this is where it's gone. You know, our children are not even safe at Catholic schools. We have to do this, because if we just let this go, then it's as much as saying that we accept it, we affirm it, we're fine with it. You know, and it reminds me of in the 1960s, in the Archdiocese of Goulburn, there was a similar fight, would you believe, about bathrooms. And the Archbishop, he turned to the state government, he said, I'm going to close the Catholic schools on Monday because of what you're doing. Now, this was a fight about the fact that the government didn't want to fund a new bathroom being built at the Goulburn Catholic School. And so it wasn't about transgender ideology, it was actually just about funding. But the decision of that Archbishop to say, I'm closing the Catholic schools because you're not supporting us, and these kids are going to have to go to the state school system, that was actually instrumental to changing state government policy. Because, you know, as Jared Henderson wrote, because there were only 640 vacancies in the public school system, these 2,000 kids that were going to Catholic schools, they were now overwhelming the public system, and they were influxing into it. So this got to the point where in the 1967 election, the Menzies Liberal Party took to the polls and they said, we believe that we should fund Catholic and private schools because it's in the interests of everyone. Labor also jumped on board. So, you know, it shows you when an archbishop actually has courage, it can actually make a difference. And what we need now from the Archbishop of Adelaide is the courage to sack the Catholic Education Office and to sack this principal of this Catholic school who wrote that letter, to get rid of the people that believe in the woke religion, the trans cult, and don't believe in the Catholic faith. Because you cannot be a Catholic institution if you're not Catholic. In this book by Professor Helen Alvarez, who's one of the best law academics in the world, she's written this book, and it really goes through forensically how Catholic institutions are being infiltrated by essentially people that just aren't Catholic. And Catholic institutions, if they want to remain Catholic, they need to make sure that they expect public-facing employees to be Catholic, to be consistent with the teachings of the church. Otherwise, they just can't be Catholic institutions. So all of this to say, thank you for watching this video. Please write to the Archbishop. I'm going to put the details down below for his contact details so that you can make a complaint. You can send an email. Doesn't matter if you live in a different state. We have to speak up for these children. It's really important. Thank you for watching. That's today on The Dr. Jo Show.